10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 308. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 308 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. This is our third episode of the month, so you know what that means. We are going to do our lick of the month, and this month we're going to take a look at an awesome solo by the great and late Roy Hargrove over the jazz standard, But Not For Me. But before we jump into the show, just wanted to welcome in. If you're new to the show, wanted to let you know this is a listener-supported podcast, which means that we do not do any advertisements on the show. We simply rely on listeners just like you to support us with a small monthly donation. And in return for that donation, you do get a PDF and audio examples and all sorts of awesome jazz education materials along with every single episode. The way that we handle these monthly donations is through the Patreon platform. And if you're somebody that would like to support the show because you like what we're doing here, you can go to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners and get yourself signed up today. You can join the over 350 people that have pledged their support so far. Wanted to give a quick shout out to a brand new patron. Thank you to our new $5 patron, Dexter. Thank you so much for signing up, joining the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson family. And of course, to everybody that has been donating for months and years, thank you. We could not do this show without you. So again, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up today for instant access. All right. Let's jump into the show. So normally, you guys that have been with me for a long time, you know what we do here on Lick of the Month. We choose a short and interesting lick, and we kind of dissect it a little bit. And this month, I have been listening to a lot of Roy Hargrove and transcribing some of his solos. So I wanted to do something by Roy. So one of my personal favorite albums, something I've been listening to since I was a very young man, is an album by Roy Hargrove and the great saxophonist Antonio Hart called The Tokyo Sessions, all the way from back in 1992. So I had been listening to this album a lot, transcribing some stuff, and I happened to pull a couple of choruses from Roy's solo on the great George Gershwin tune, But Not For Me. And I figured this would be a great thing to present to you this week. Now, different this week than what we normally do for Lick of the Month, we're going to be looking at a whole chorus of Roy's over this. In fact, it is the first chorus of his solo on But Not For Me. And the reason why I chose an entire chorus is because I almost felt like I couldn't take anything out of it and leave the rest of it. This opening chorus of his solo is such a statement, and it flows so well together from the beginning of the chorus to the end that I just couldn't take anything out of context. So I decided to present the entire first chorus to you, the first 32 bars of his solo. Now, I want to talk about a bunch of things, but first, let's talk about why I couldn't pull anything out of the chorus. Truly, the mark of a great soloist is when everything that they play flows so nicely into the next thing that they play that you feel like you can't break it up. That is somebody that's thinking on a much higher level than you are if you're just first starting out and trying to string together these little micro phrases. Seeing a musician tie together 32 entire measures made up of a bunch of different individual phrases really says something to me. It really gives me something to strive for, to think on a little bit of a bigger level rather than that micro level, like what note should I be playing over this one chord? That's how we initially start thinking about jazz, right? And then once we start to be able to do that without thinking as hard, now we can start thinking about phrase level. And then eventually, when we know we can string together really, really good phrases, now we can start to think on a multi-phrase level, and eventually we could think on a chorus or even an entire solo level. So I wanted to start out by mentioning that, how amazing it is that I felt like, nope, can't stop here. Nope, can't just pull this out. I've got to present these listeners with the entire chorus because there's just no good place to stop until the end of the chorus. All right. So with that being said, let's hear the first chorus of Roy's solo over this. Now, of course, I really wish I could just play Roy's solo, but can't do that. I'll get hit with the copyright infringements, and I can't afford to pay for it. So you're going to have to hear my poor imitation of Roy Hargrove on trumpet on my tenor saxophone. So let me play this first chorus here. You can listen to the entire thing. Make sure you have your PDF in front of you. And then we're going to talk about a couple of other things that I think make this statement so excellent. Here we go. So such an excellent melodic statement, such a great 32 bar statement of a first chorus of a solo. So let's start at the beginning and we'll kind of work our way through, talk about what's going on. So it's important to realize that the first 2 bars on the record, they're actually a solo break. So you'll notice that the first 2 bars are the last 2 bars of the initial chorus of the melody. And then bar 3 on the transcription on your PDF is actually where the chorus starts. There's a double bar there. So what we see for about the first 8 measures of his solo statement is a lot of really busy bebop type playing. Now, what makes it bebop heavy? Well, in my mind, it's a lot of the chromaticism that Roy does, along with a lot of syncopation. So the first thing I want you to check out in this solo, in that first 10 bars, is where does the chromaticism happen and how is he using syncopation to create an effective solo flow, right? To keep you listening. How is he doing that? So I want you to investigate those 2 things. And of course, if you see like a 2-5-1 or you hear something that you find really, really interesting, start pulling that out of there. Put it in a notebook, write it down for later, try to analyze exactly what he's doing. What I want to draw your attention to is that for the first 8 measures of the chorus, he's playing really, really, really busy. A lot of 8th notes. He's got some 16th note stuff tied in there. And then in measure 11, he comes out of that 8th note stuff and plays some quarter notes. This is really, really crucial to the pacing of the solo. If you are going to play some really, really, really dense 8th note and 16th note based material, a really good idea is to end that phrase with a completely different and longer note value. This really provides your listener with a little bit of a break, okay? It's coming at you fast and furious, fast and furious. Oh, okay, now he's slowed down the pace a little bit and we're getting ready for the next phrase. It kind of does 2 things. It signals the end of the first part of his solo and then gets us ready for the next portion of his solo. Now, after he plays that little phrase at bar 11 that spills into bar 12, that is quarter note based, now we see a really ballsy thing that not a lot of us do, but we should. He takes like almost 3 full measures off and just lets there be silence. Particularly, again, at this tempo, that's a really great thing because 2.5, 3 bars is not too long to rest for. It goes by really, really fast. But most of us think we have to fill up every single measure with notes. And Roy kind of teaches us, no, you don't. A lot of the time, it's really much more effective to not play than it is to play. So let's listen to that. We're going to listen again to the first little tiny bit of the solo, which is that first phrase. Then we're going to hear that silence, and then we're going to talk about what happens after. Isn't that note when he comes in on beat 4 and measure 14? It's so effective after that silence. I love it so much. And now he's kind of continuing this same theme. So what you'll notice is that when he comes in a pick up to 15, he's launching into this really, really long, again, super busy eighth note phrase. So from the end of measure 14, all the way until measure 25, he's playing one long string of eighth notes and 16th notes. So again, he's really using that juxtaposition of you just heard a bunch of silence. Now he's going to hit you with a bunch of notes. Now, within this phrase from 15 down to 25, there's a lot. There's a lot to take in here. I want to draw your attention to two places. First of all, measure 18, because he does a really good job of taking it slightly out. He's introducing a little bit of tension in measure 18, where he's using the flat 9 and the sharp 9. So I want you to take a peek at that measure, see if you can figure out what he's doing with that flat 9, sharp 9. Then he comes back inside. He's really, really leaning on his bebop skills all the way through the next 4, 5 bars. And then in measure 24, he's going to do a little tension thing again there. So I want you to look at the first half of measure 24 and figure out what he's doing to give us that little touch of him playing outside of the chord changes just for a split second, and then he comes right back inside those changes. So let's check this out. We're going to start pick up to 15, and we're going to listen all the way until 25. Now, again, we see there's a little bit of silence after this, only about a bar. But again, like there's the physical attribute of it. He's got to get a breath and get ready for the next phrase. But again, there's that musical part of it of giving your listener just a second to catch their breath after hearing that amazing line. Now, what we see in the closing phrase is, again, this beautiful, beautiful mix of longer note values. So if we look at the pickup to 27, he's going back to that quarter note bass sound for a couple of measures. Then in measure 29, he hits us again with a flurry of notes. This time it's triplet based. So he first slows things down with quarter note bass material, then hits us with a bunch of notes, bunch of triplets. And then the very last phrase is a really cool mix of both. So we see in 31, we have quarter notes and half notes. 32, we have eighth notes. And then 33, we have a quarter note and a half note. It really is just masterful playing. Let's just check out this last phrase that we just talked about. So I hope you can hear why I didn't want to present you with anything less than the entire chorus. And even at the end of the chorus, it's like you're ready for more. You're ready to hear what his next chorus is. So I highly suggest going to check out that entire recording. But I think that chorus is such a great snapshot of what a really, really masterful musician would do. Okay, some of the ways that they structure their solos and choruses, and they're thinking about all that stuff. How am I going to start this? How am I going to end this? How am I going to use space? How am I going to use note values to really pace my solo along here and keep the listener highly, highly engaged? I think all those things were probably going on subconsciously for Roy when he's playing over this. It's not something that he plans out before he starts playing. It really maintains that sense of spontaneity, but you got to understand he's just such a musician, such a great musician. He's done this so many times and he's practiced enough that he kind of does this subconsciously. He does it without thinking it. It's like hard for him to play a bad solo, a non-effective solo. And I just think we should all strive for that level. So what do I want you to do? First of all, go ahead and dive into the nitty gritty, the harmonic part of it, because there's a bunch of stuff that you can take from this solo. Then I really want you to think about all the things we just talked about. How can you start to work some of those pacing things into your own playing? How would you go about starting to even think about that? How would you go about working on it, right? These are all very personal things to us. And I hope that this solo gives you a chance to like kickstart that kind of thinking and maybe and hopefully take your playing to the next level. Of course, the very, very first thing you should do before any of those things that I just mentioned is learn it and be able to play it along with him and get as close to his style as you possibly can, right? So you're gonna have to work it up to about 200, and that can be tough right there. But make sure you can play it along with him first, because none of the other stuff really matters unless you have that feel down and you could play it just like Roy. There shouldn't be much of a difference between the way that you play it and the way that he plays it. Okay? So let me know what you think about all this stuff. You can get in touch with me on the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Community Facebook page. That's probably the best way to get in touch with me. You can also email me at 10minutejazzlesson@gmail.com. Hope you enjoyed this. Have fun with the PDF and have fun with all of the wonderful things we can learn just by listening and studying to Roy Hargrove's playing. And remember, you can get the PDF and some audio examples. I'll throw a backing track in there at 10minutejazzlesson.com. Click on one of those Patreon banners. You get instant access to everything that we've ever done over there. Hope you're all doing well out there. As always, staying safe and healthy. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.